Hey guys, this is gonna be a long video, but believe me, hang in there because what you'll learn can be instrumental in finding out why and how you get into stroke more often. So without further ado, here's my take on pool and flow. You ever wonder how some players can just catch such a high gear? Guys like Shane Van Boening or Joshua Filler, freaking Jason Shaw running 714 balls in straight pool. These guys just find a way to get in such a rhythm they don't seem to miss. They have the potential to run racks on racks on racks like it's the easiest game you've ever seen, and they do it under pressure. Well, I've been having a lot of conversations lately with some friends about being able to perform under pressure and getting to that high gear. These conversations revolve around really low stakes and amateur tournaments, league play, but nonetheless, it's an important part of our game. And at a certain point, it might be the most important part of our game. I have always been a pretty quick learner. I obsess over skill acquisition. I was a competitive gymnast. I'm a martial artist. I went to art school for film, playing musical instruments, learning vocal technique, learning a language, hobbies like archery, bowling, and now pool. I've just spent a lot of time finding new interests and pursuing them. In my experience, most of the ways that you get better at something, including improving your mental state, revolve around something called flow. Real quick though, before I get into it, let me make something very, very clear. Getting in flow and hitting that high gear does not make the pressure go away. The pressure is never going to go away. On the contrary, the pressure of the challenge is often what gets you into flow. The shitty pool player in you will not go away. It will always be there. You will always play within a range, a skill floor and a skill ceiling. And there are ways to lift that skill ceiling. Being in flow is one of those ways. So what is flow? It goes by many names. It might be the zone, runner's high if you're a runner, or being unconscious if you're a basketball player. In pool, we might call it being in stroke, or in dead stroke, or in dead punch. Flow has just become the scientific or technical term for it. As described by award-winning author and expert in flow and peak performance, Stephen Kotler.
It is technically defined as an optimal state of consciousness, one where we feel our best and we perform our best. More specifically, it refers to those moments of rapt attention and total absorption. We get so focused on the task at hand, everything else just disappears. Action and awareness will start to merge. Your sense of self will vanish. Time will dilate, which is a fancy way of saying it passes strangely. So sometimes, occasionally, it'll slow down and you get that freeze frame effect from maybe anyone who's been in a car crash. And more frequently, it speeds up and 5 hours go by in like 5 minutes. And throughout, all aspects of performance, both mental and physical, go through the roof.
Researchers describe this state as being able to dramatically improve performance across all areas: physical performance, creativity, problem solving. This can happen for a few key reasons. Put simply, flow is a drug. It is a mixture of neurotransmitters releasing in the brain all at once. Serotonin, anandamide, adrenaline, norepinephrine, dopamine. These make flow states literally the most addicting drug on the planet. So when in flow, your brain is in this strange in-between relaxed yet hyper-attentive state. It revolves around something called transient hypofrontality.
A lot of our old ideas about ultimate human performance are very, very wrong. The 10% brain myth. This is something you've probably all heard of. It's the idea that at any one point, we're just using a small portion of our brain, say 10%. So ultimate performance, AKA flow, must be the full brain on overdrive, right? Turns out we actually had it exactly backwards. In flow, we're not using more of the brain, we're actually using less of the brain. The technical term for this is transient, meaning temporary, hypofrontality. Hypo is H-Y-P-O, it's the opposite of hyper. And frontality is the prefrontal cortex, right? The part of your brain that's right back here. Now, this is an extremely powerful part of your brain. In flow, this portion of the brain shuts down. It's actually an efficiency exchange. The brain is trading energy it needs for attention and it's shutting down non-critical structures.
It's a big word, but hang in there with me. You stop processing with the slow and deliberate analytical part of the brain and you start incorporating more of the subconscious into your process. It's important to understand the stages of flow, and there are 4: struggle, release, flow, and recovery. I promise you I will get to the pool stuff, but it will be hugely beneficial to you if you first understand these stages, so please bear with me. Stage 1 is struggle. It's when you are working on the hard stuff, practicing, reading books, trying new things, learning new skills, whatever it may be. It's just gathering all the information that your brain can handle. Maybe it's working on your pre-shot routine or your stroke, your shot making, running drills. It's also important to note this doesn't just include pool. This includes everything. You want to soak up as much information as possible. Focus on another game or sport, work, other interests, whatever it is. You want to look for things that have intersectionality with the goal at hand, in our case, pool. For me, it's martial arts, working and understanding efficient biomechanics, and that translates to pool pretty directly sometimes. And for you, it might be different. Whatever it is, it's crucial that you pay attention and find new ways to incorporate those experiences in your life. Maybe drive a different way to work every day, or eat something new, or cook something new, play at a different pool hall. Your brain loves to soak up new information. Here's the catch though. Cultivating new experiences only leaves that information in short-term memory. You need to move what's in short-term memory into long-term storage. There are plenty of ways to do this. Practice the new thing that you've learned. Teach it. Write a journal on your thoughts or experiences. Like, it's not enough to just watch every pool instruction video in the world and assume that you're going to get better from that. It only becomes applicable and memorable after you've built multiple neural pathways and start making more connections. It takes persistence and dedication to apply what you've learned on the table. I mean, how many times have you retroactively shunned yourself for missing a ball or playing badly, knowing full well what you could have done in that moment? It just didn't come to you. Soaking up experiences is great, but you can't actually get into flow without moving your brain from a very conscious and actively participating state into something a little bit more relaxed. And anxiety is the biggest blocker for flow states. So to counteract that, you want to make sure to learn some breathing exercises, mindfulness, and the like. You take breaks, do something a little bit non-pool related when you play. This way, getting back to the table gives you a fresh perspective. It's easy for the brain to maintain its current state without external changes, meaning if you're playing poorly, you're going to keep playing poorly unless you really change something. So yeah, change something externally to change your mindset. This release stage is when transient hypofrontality kicks in. This is where flow triggers become huge.
Flow states are hackable. What we have discovered is that flow states have triggers. These are preconditions that lead to more flow. The first thing you need to know is the most obvious. Flow follows focus. It can only show up when all of our attention is focused in the right here, the right now. So that's what most of these triggers do. They drive attention into the now.
Here's a list of some triggers. Passion, risk, and clear goals are all important ones, but specifically for achieving flow in something like playing pool, the one I want to highlight is the challenge to skill ratio. Researchers have found that very often when reaching flow, it's because you are facing a challenge that is actually higher than your max skill level. The sweet spot seems to be about 4% above your max. Yes, this means playing someone that is better than you. But be careful, if a challenge is too easy for your skill level, apathy sets in, and your brain will cap your performance. But if a goal is too hard for your level, anxiety sets in and your brain will cap your performance. Finding that sweet spot will get you in stroke like nothing else. So stage 3 of flow is flow. It's when the magic happens. It's when you hit that gear and you feel like you just can't miss. Sometimes it lasts for a rack, and sometimes it lasts for a whole night or longer. Pool is a game that relies on a constant feedback loop, a dopamine feedback loop to be specific. Think of it as snowballing. Snowballing can work to your detriment, but it can also work in your favor. We've all had those moments where you make one hard shot, then you follow it up with another, and then another, and it seems to build on itself. Suddenly, you're not missing. And when someone shoots like they're on a roll, that's not luck. That's biology. So dopamine is the brain's pleasure drug, right? It tells you that whatever you're doing feels right. And what's more, it has the ability to compound on itself over and over. I'm willing to bet that almost every pool player notices this. When you start to get in stroke, you shoot faster. Not only do you shoot faster, you're more comfortable at the table. Your pre-shot routine is shorter. You move around the table quicker. You start taking pleasure in the confidence of your game. Your sense of self, your critique of yourself kind of fades away. And suddenly, you're on the last ball in the rack and you have no idea how you got there. That's flow. After flow, without a doubt, you will experience low. Not just low, the lowest of lows. And it's hard not to. You've just depleted your brain's performance neurochemicals, and you got to pick those back up again. It takes time. Your brain needs a rest and your body needs a rest, and it does cap your performance. That's why often you shoot your highest of highs right next to your lowest of lows. And you can't fight it. It sucks. You just need to know that it's happening when it's happening. You gotta grin and bear it. And what's happening in this stage is that your experiences have been logged, and it now needs to move from short-term to long term. So if you can, take a break or stop playing, focus on rest. This is the hardest part of the flow cycle. Moving from recovery back into the struggle stage is always difficult. This is where you need to learn grit. I'll put a link in the description for a really good article on the different types of grit and how it relates to peak performance and flow. Just know that after this period, it does get better, but you need to be okay with performing at your skill floor for probably a little while. The key here is you got to learn to like it. There's actually a military term for it. Embrace the suck. You have to learn to be okay with the shitty parts of your game to get back to the good parts of your game. Okay, Nate, how does knowing this actually help my pool game? Give me something actionable here. Okay, fine. Knowing about flow isn't just for increasing your skill ceiling, it is also for building up your skill floor. Now, I'm a technique and mechanics nut. I love to dive into all the physical aspects of our game, but that only goes so far when what you are actually learning can't be solidified in the brain without a little extra help. So here's just a few scenarios and tips for incorporating flow into your training. Please note, I am just an amateur playing a few years now. I am not an instructor. I am simply sharing what I've learned on this channel. The methods I mentioned here are designed for inducing flow using what I've learned on the subject. This goes for everything, but especially if you are working on the basics. You want to make sure you are tackling elements of your game from multiple angles. What do I mean by this? Well, your brain likes to make connections like a crossword puzzle. Like when two words down and across meet, it's very satisfying, and your brain likes to utilize that information. You get a nice dopamine hit when you make connections like that, and suddenly your brain remembers it. So actionably, that means trying different drills that cover the same bases. Maybe a stop shot drill that switch up the distance or the speed or the spin. This requires good Q-tip placement, right? So maybe you work on a Q-tip placement drill. Maybe it's the clock drill. Just find different ways to tackle the same problems. It's also handy to create a visual and mnemonic significance for these aspects of your game. Research suggests that creating a new habit and getting rid of old ones ironically has nothing to do with actually changing the behavior itself. Instead, it has everything to do with giving yourself a cue. Ironic phrasing for pool players, but give yourself a cue. For example, if I wanted to make a new habit of pausing on my backswing, then I need to give my brain a cue to pause till it becomes natural to do it. Maybe you sing a phrase of a song or come up with words that match the timing. For example, you can say something like peanut butter and jelly, but you would time the phrase accordingly. Peanut butter and jelly, and on jelly you strike the cue ball. Making connections in the brain over and over like that will help you build new habits. Remember, as long as you can find more than one way to address a problem in the brain, the more significant the brain logs that information. Let's say you have a long cut shot that keeps giving you problems. The same shot over and over. Try this. Make sure you are aiming standing up, and when you get down, before you pull the trigger, close your eyes. Focus on kinesthetic awareness. Pay attention to everything else, feeling the cue, listening to the hit. Eventually, you'll make a few balls with your eyes closed. Your brain will naturally log that information as novel experience. It'll light up with new neural pathways using those other senses, making the shot line that you got down on hard to forget. Your brain has the amazing ability to recognize shapes and patterns. Drilling shots will always work, but trying things like this, creating that dopamine feedback loop during training, it'll reinforce and connect that aiming line to your vision to get you improving faster. There are many players, myself included, that overanalyze when playing for specific position, trying to get the elements of the stroke, tip position, and everything else perfect, thinking that that's going to solve the problem of being unsure of the shot. Unfortunately, the neurotransmitter norepinephrine has something to say about that. Norepinephrine is what gives you that fight or flight response. It triggers fear and uncertainty, and it's likely the biggest reason why you're not performing well under pressure. So instead of being a catalyst for flow, it becomes a blocker. This is why working on breathing and mindfulness, focusing on the task at hand and putting those bad moments behind you is so useful. It's just nice to be able to tell yourself that you are good enough to tackle the task at hand. One way of helping you do that might be visualization. In the 1950s, Dr. Biasiotto from the University of Chicago conducted an experiment. Sports psychologists today cite it all the time. Essentially, he tested whether or not visualizing a free throw shot in basketball made any impact on performance. What he found was staggering. Visualization brought nearly the same amount of improvement as the actual practice did. That's because when you imagine a shot, your brain lights up with the same signals as if it were the real thing. Except in your imagination, you're not missing. You're realistically seeing the outcome of the shot and your brain is recording that success. Visualization has since become instrumental in helping athletes overcome their obstacles. This is no different in pool. So imagine a step-by-step first-person view of yourself executing the shot with the cue ball path tracking on the table where you want it to go. Try not to think or analyze too much what you need to do. Just see the shot in your mind and simply get down and copy what you see. This is actually touched on in Tor Lowry's video, where he explains how some players should try to visualize the shot in order to improve their chances of making it. Your brain is just full of useful information, and giving it a clear goal will help narrow down what information to use for any given shot. This is especially helpful for us analytical types. So here's another way to learn quickly. There's a guy by the name of Jim Quick. He's well known for being an expert on learning quickly, as well as speed reading, memory, and some other things. But there's something he says that has always stuck with me since the first time I heard it.
If you want to learn any subject or skill faster, learn it as if you're going to teach it to somebody else. Because when you're learning it to teach it, then you're going to pay attention differently. Then you're going to make it your own. Then you're going to remember it differently. Because here's the thing. When you teach something, you get to learn it twice.
Just explaining to someone else or writing down or saying out loud the things that you have learned, it makes it hard to forget. So I would suggest whenever you get the opportunity to talk about something you've learned in pool, do it. It's actually a big reason why I started making videos. It's to relearn aspects of the game that I might struggle with or have some revelation about. Okay, Nate, none of this matters if I can't be in flow when it counts. Firstly, the better you get at learning, the more you can improve your skill floor for when you need to play under pressure. And raising your skill floor will really help not just improve your game at the table, but it also gives you confidence. Secondly, everything I just talked about can still be applied during a match. This is especially true when talking about triggers and the release stage of flow, because the release and flow stages of the flow cycle are what's happening during a match. I'm sure you can all think of someone who takes very little time to get to the table, regardless of when they play. They just seem to not care. And maybe they miss a bunch of balls, but eventually they'll make one, and then they'll make two. And suddenly they're running racks, and they're in rhythm just because they brute forced it into existence. Now that can work for some people, and if it works for you, great. Doesn't really work for me, but neurologically, it tracks. Everyone is going to find some flow triggers that work for them better than others. You just have to find what works for you and repeat it. Maybe it's paying attention to whether you should let your stroke out and get that nice dopamine hit, or maybe it's playing more safe, locking someone up, and then getting ball in hand to give you that confidence. You just have to find the moves that work for you, get your blood pumping, get you excited at the table, and also gives you confidence at the same time. Because that's really the only way to overcome those things holding you back from getting in stroke. Look, there is a lot more I could say about the science of flow states and its impact on our ability to learn and play pool. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding this one specific aspect of our mental side of the game. But if you want more or a different topic or more detail, please let me know. Also, if you want to read something that actually has very actionable steps in tackling your goals, not just in pool, but in anything really, I would suggest you pick up Stephen Kotler's book, The Art of Impossible. It goes through a lot of what I've mentioned in this video and a lot more, and all of it is helpful in understanding and achieving better performance. All right, if you have any questions about this topic or anything else I've said in this video, go ahead and leave a comment or reach out. That's it. Thanks for watching. Happy shooting, y'all.